Okay, so it looks like we're getting a pretty good number of people here. Again, good morning. I want to welcome you to the first of our all-school presentations about the work of the Anti-Racism Committee. Again, thank you for your participation. Again, your participation in the work of the Anti-Racism Committee is going to be important as we continue to go forward here at SAIC together. I want to repeat again that the meeting today is being recorded, and hopefully we'll be making that available to everyone shortly online. My name is Craig Downs. I'm Executive Director of the Media and Instructional Resources in the Department of Instructional Resources and Facilities Management here at the school. I am also BFA 95, he, him, his are my pronouns, a longtime staff member from back in the 20th century. I'm also a member of the Anti-Racism Committee, also known as ARC, and I'm glad to be a member of a couple of the subcommittees, and I'm going to help moderate today's event, and hopefully we're going to all have a good informative time here. Thank you very much. Today, we're going to review a lot of the action items, all of the action items that were developed by the ARC subcommittees over several meetings that we've had since last fall. And we're going to talk about ways that we're going to be able to implement these ideas at SAIC. We're going to start today with a presentation. Joining me today are our ARC co-chairs, Delinda Collier, who's Interim Dean of Graduate Studies. Jefferson Pender is Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for Academic Affairs. They're the co-chairs of the ARC Committee at large. And we have the initiator of our committee, of course, our school president, Alyssa Tenney. They'll be doing the presentation together. They're going to have some opening remarks, give the presentation providing an overview of what the process was for the ARC Anti-Racism Committee, for the subcommittees, and how that how the recommendations out of those subcommittees became the action items that we're going to review today. I want everybody here to feel free to ask your questions during the meeting using the Zoom Q&A feature. After the presentation, first we're going to cover some of the questions that were submitted in advance through our community email and our sources there. And then as we get through that, we'll turn to as many of your questions from today as we can. We're going to try to go right up to about 12:30. And if we don't get to all of the questions today, this is not the last chance. There are going to be several meetings taking place further on in this semester, 3 more before the end of the semester. And we're going to try to get back to you. And we'll certainly try to cover all of the questions in one of those sessions if we don't get to them today. Anyway, again, we are recording. Feel free to put your questions in the Q&A. Without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our co-chairs and the president for our presentation. Let's get to the presentation. Jefferson and Delinda, welcome this morning.
Hey, Craig, thank you so much. It's great to have you here today. Welcome everybody to today's event. We are so excited to share with you the work that the Anti-Racism Committee has undertaken. It's been an amazing and unprecedented endeavor. But before we start into our presentation, we wanted to begin by addressing a topic that Delinda and myself have written about and we've spoken about this week: anti-Asian racial discrimination and violence. The tragic events of Atlanta last week and the noble solidarity marches around the country since then have galvanized our conviction with the message we shared with the community earlier. In that message, we said it's important to acknowledge that this continued rise of hate is real and widespread. And as a community, it's vital for us to denounce this hatred and violence and stand together to reinforce safety and solidarity wherever we can. And in our message, we also laid out several things that you could do as individuals to get involved, and how Anti-Racism Committee would be forming a new subcommittee specifically charged with thinking about how to build Asian inclusivity right here on campus. And thank you for those who've reached out for the bystander intervention training that's going to be happening next month. We've begun to reach out to you and various different groups to start our new ARC subcommittee that is focusing on these issues, as well as on continuing our ARC recommendations and our action items. What is ARC really about? How do we acknowledge racism in the structured world around us, recognizing its manifestations at our school, and how to get our house in order so that we can take action through these permanent aspects of the school, staff, and administration. Shared governance, student support, curriculum, changing the way we do business, and making SAIC a more diverse, equitable, inclusive environment. And also an anti-racist place to work, create, learn, and develop together. So the action items that we've shared with you last week via email, and we'll review the outline today, are strategies to answer that challenge that we have so far. After we review those items, we'll talk about ARC's next steps and answer any questions that you have for us. But before we jump into presentation, however, we want to invite our president, Alyssa Tenning, to say a few words. ARC reports directly to her, and we want to thank her for the support she has given our work, endorsing our recommendations, and helping us turn these into action items. So without further ado, Alyssa.
Thank you, Jefferson, for the introduction, and thank you to you and Delinda for all the work you've done in leading this really important committee. I'm thankful to all the faculty, staff, and student members of ARC and its subcommittees for having deep and difficult conversations and compiling an impressive list of 23 recommendations that we'll be talking about today. The ideas we'll discuss today and will continue to discuss over the next several days are initiatives in curriculum, retention, staffing, and training. They endorse making new spaces and creating new staff roles. And they're all the things we can undertake as a school as we implement them together. I say together because changing our school will take even more of us than the nearly 80 members of ARC and its subcommittees. As you will see as we review the next step of each item, some action items will need to go back to their subcommittees to be refined and structured. Some new groups, like a student group to work on the dedicated student space, will be formed. Many need development and approval by our shared governance bodies like the Faculty Senate, and some will help shape our fundraising efforts. But I hope you will agree with ARC and me that the following action items are worthwhile endeavors we'll continue to pursue for the betterment of our SAIC. I'll now turn it back over to Jefferson and Delinda to take the lead in presenting the action items.
Thanks, Alyssa. So before we dive into each one of the action items, and hopefully you've had a chance to read over them, we just wanted to quickly review the process that we took to arrive at them, since not everybody was sort of keyed into the process as we were doing it. So as Alyssa mentioned, ARC was formed last summer to address the systemic issues on our campus that were brought to our attention through various letters, emails, publications, et cetera. And from the beginning, our charge has been to shape the wisdom of our community into actionable items that can make lasting change at SAIC. So we built into our charge and our subcommittees many of the demands, requests, and initiatives suggested last summer via petitions, et cetera, and student group initiatives to make sure that we address those ideas in our planning. So I want to really stress that from the beginning, we formulated these subcommittees based almost verbatim on some of those things that we called from those many things. So we've highlighted the individuals here listed because we've had a lot of questions about the makeup of the board or the committee, sorry. We have one board member. That was pretty exciting development for us. We also formed 6 subcommittees with additional community members who each focused on different topics. Each subcommittee had lengthy conversations about how to address issues in their area. And these conversations culminated in a series of recommendations earlier this semester. The main committee then vetted those recommendations, ranked them, and shared them with Alyssa, who endorsed them. Now, as Alyssa mentions, we have to implement them through shared governance bodies of the schools. There are some that already we've started to receive feedback on and some corrections. And so we think that's an important part of the process. This was such a wide-ranging set of recommendations that was sure to happen. So this is an ongoing conversation, an ongoing process. So a review of those items and an explanation of our next steps will comprise the remainder of the presentation. So since there are so many action items, we divided them up into several topical categories, and this is just for kind of coherence here. These categories will help structure not only today's review, but the recommendations in each category will become the focus of 3 future meetings that we've mentioned. The categories are define, which those action items about what we think anti-racism means and how that understanding is communicated. Learn are those action items about how our continuous learning and unlearning in and out of the classroom. And finally, support are those action items designed to make us more inclusive and caring for everyone throughout their time at SAIC. So let's start with define. Jefferson.
Okay, our first action item was to establish a definition of an anti-racist practice as having a shared vocabulary, even one we revisited and updated from time to time, felt important for ongoing discussions and progress. So this task was taken on by the curriculum subcommittee, who felt having a shared sense of what the anti-racism definition would sound like and what it would be for the whole school. So when considering this recommendation, ARC liked this approach and felt that defining related terms, diversity, equity, inclusion would also be very important. ARC and Alyssa endorsed this definition of anti-racism and will be checking in with the curriculum committee as well as vetting it through other parts of the school body to make sure that this definition is not only one that ARC endorses, but the one that's endorsed overall. But when ready, definitions will be shared with the faculty senate and student government to help establish a shared vocabulary. Delinda?
Sorry, had to unmute. In 2015, SAIC began a long-term commitment to the North Lawndale neighborhood when faculty, students, and staff had been designing curriculum and program for our classrooms situated at the Nichols Tower in Homan Square. This has led to some amazing projects and collaborations with the community partners, but the work there hasn't been allowed to shape the orientation of the downtown campus as fully as it ought to have. The SAIC in North Lawndale subcommittee was formed to devote to finding ways to make this work more central to the school. So there was a general kind of understanding that Homan needs to change our culture here and not the other way around. So as part of this recommendation, they listed ways in which those who work in Homan Square have felt marginalized. And in an effort to lead by example, the Office of the President will continue to host cabinet meetings and retreats at Homan Square, making them a regular fixture of their agenda, and also to schedule board events at the North Lawndale site. They will also work with colleagues and other departments to ensure the school's presence in Nichols Tower is part of regular systems and communications, and encourage engagement with SAIC at Homan Square through our shared governance.
All right, we all want to see more BIPOC individuals among our staff and faculty. And so to help in this effort, the Law and Hiring subgroup suggested expanding the language of search materials and job postings. We noticed that there was a lot of flexibility and possibilities if we reorganized and thought about the language that we're putting out to the public to understand what our goals are. So both staff and faculty have been, positions have been targeted here to help recruit a diverse workforce. ARC further suggested that once adopted, the language could also help shape criteria, search processes, and student employment. Next, we'll be asking individuals on the Project and Law and Hiring subcommittee to finish their work before advancing to Human Resources and then the Dean's Office for implementation. Delinda?
Okay, keep getting this mute thing wrong. The communications plan, which I'm not great at, it had to do with, how do we talk to each other about what everybody's doing? So the communication subgroup had a number of good ideas, including the framework we'll be using to communicate with you about the work of ARC in this forum and then the subsequent webinars. So one of the core aspects of this communications plan is an approach that they named problem, process, solution, which is about first acknowledging the mistakes and the problems that we are trying to fix and really acknowledging those as we talk openly about our process and our path to a solution. And so we hope today's presentation and these subsequent webinars are helpful in modeling this approach and that we all kind of start to figure out ways to connect up and synergize our efforts. Alyssa?
SASC's core values were made over 12 years ago. Our mission statement was updated even further back. So while Delinda Jefferson and I were having some anti-racism sessions with our Board of Governors, it seemed clear to us that the school is ready to reconsider how we express our essential values. We'll be making a strategy for how to review those values that will surely include input from ARC, shared governance bodies, and staff and student representations, while also giving some of our best writers the space to be creative.
The climate subcommittee has been hard at work on planning a space dedicated for students who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color. The next step is including and forming a student focus group to join the planning discussions and working with IRFM staff to identify a physical location on campus.
Okay, so the next one, moving on to the Learn action items, the idea to adopt a diverse course requirement was suggested by both the curriculum and North Lawndale groups. There are still some aspects of this idea to work out. In fact, I think it's going to take us a long time to work these things out, and a lot of input is needed as what counts as diverse and diversity curriculum requirements. Of course, we've had these before, not the requirement, but the discussions about what this term means. And if there isn't a more accurate name for it, we'll ask the Faculty Senate Curriculum Committee to further clarify these ideas and advance it by a regular curricular approval process. Ideally, this will inspire a more diverse curriculum and help us retain those faculty members who teach those courses. I think this is really key, and I think that the more input that we have on this, the better. Jefferson?
Yes, and training. I think we all know that we want more training. We want to be more knowledgeable. We want to be more informed. So I've been working with ARC member Sampata Aranki to identify some DEI trainers proficient in the art school space. I think that was really important for us to identify individuals who had experience working with art schools. So we'll be doing a pilot for some training with the department heads and hiring managers as soon as next month, the very beginning of next month. We've contracted Jesse Villalobos, and he's going to be coming in and he's going to be doing training for hiring managers as well as department heads. So it's excellent. This is happening right now. So these trainings are going to address implicit bias and set up for future searches, staff, and faculty retention. So it's all part of this big network in which we're thinking not only of bringing people in, but how to keep them once they're here.
Okay, so for this action items, the communication subgroup suggested a range of ideas to encourage community-wide conversation, including an online space, a student event, and a thematic programming to coordinate with campus reading, among others. And we'll be pursuing those with the various constituencies. So for example, Jefferson and I will meet with student government next week regarding the student event. Alyssa?
In their conversations, the curriculum committee was very interested in re-engaging some anti-racist pedagogical support for faculty, which was part of a proposed teaching and learning center. Though the pandemic meant we had to postpone plans for the center, faculty support and training is already underway, as Jefferson just mentioned, under the auspices of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for Academic Affairs staff. In lieu of a center, the chair of faculty will continue to guide faculty development opportunities and is encouraged to coordinate efforts with DEI for Academic Affairs. Also, many of us who were here in 2016 will remember when Citizen by Claudia Rankine was the text all incoming students were given to read and some faculty used in their classes. And everyone was encouraged to participate in some of the associated events that went along with it. So we want to do that again, and ideally to do it each year. ARC endorses CAST by Isabel Wilkerson for the 2021-22 academic year. And we're going to establish a procedure by which anyone at the school can recommend titles for future years. And I believe we've already received some recommendations. With regard to CAST, research is being conducted to determine budget needs and timeline so that we can use the text next year and sustainably repeat the procedure in future years. Delinda?
Yeah, so the Home and Square subcommittee suggested an in-development degree program, something having to do with community development, community engagement, things like that. This is a really provisional recommendation, and one that will take a lot of work and probably also be developed in some of the long-range planning. So this will take a lot of, again, our shared mechanisms of shared governance and those things to create the synergies that we're looking for.
So next is the Tuition Equity and Finance Subcommittee proposed using this online financial literacy program, which is focused on business and financial health for artists, designers, and cultural producers. We're going to pilot it in an upcoming undergraduate course, likely in a spine course. This is still to be determined, and evaluate it if it is a tool we'd like to regularly use in the curriculum. Delinda?
Okay, so as many of you know, the Native American Student Association made a proposal regarding the 280 building, which used to commonly be called the Columbus Building, in recognition of the tribal lands upon which our school is situated. At the same time, the institution instituted a street number-based nomenclature that moved away from the associations of the street name to preserve that naming opportunity. Unfortunately, the administration didn't reach out to NASA regarding their proposal in advance of announcing that naming convention, which caused unintended hurt. And since that time, the conversation has been at an impasse. Alyssa acknowledged regret at this mishandling to ARC and in writing in the action items document, and endorsed the communication group's careful multi-year plan that will ideally become a new avenue to heal the current impasse and to help the school reach a multifaceted approach to partnerships with the Native American Indigenous people, practices, and scholarship as they exist both inside and outside the institution. So we're hoping that both ARC members working on this proposal and DEI staff can help us take the next steps by designating a committee for further work.
Yeah, now I'm back to part-time hiring. Our law and hiring subgroup really identified part-time hiring as something that we could really make an immediate impact on the school with. So this is a terrific action item. It's meant to help diversify part-time faculty hiring pools through new recruitment strategies, processes, and support school-wide. When ready, members of the subcommittee will advance their proposal to the Dean's Office and Part-Time Concerns Committee for further development and adoption. So we have a really great idea, but we're still figuring out the logistics and how it's going to work. Delinda?
Okay, the Tuition Equity and Finance Subcommittee proposed to continue investigating several elements of grad admissions, specifically changes to the appeals process, incentive scholarships, and dean scholarships. The subcommittee will continue work on these proposals and also review undergraduate admissions and make more specific recommendations to ARC. And that's definitely an ongoing and complex bit of work they're doing.
And about the Buds person, I mean, this is an exciting action item because it's a very important proposal. I mean, all along, you know, the last semester when we were talking to various different student groups, we were talking to staff, everyone was in agreement that this is something that should move forward. And we're so excited that Alyssa agrees. It is those important, I guess, an Buds person is most important when people feel excluded, hurt, disconnected, and are seeking to help find reconnection, healing, and learning. And that's possibly, this position is going to be one of the big areas for us to have a learning curve in this area. An Buds person will help us define mutual restorative strategies to help negotiate conflict among all willing members of the school community. Human resources will work with academic affairs, ARC, and other stakeholders to move towards a job description and other search needs in anticipation for the search sometime next year, so we can have our Buds person in place for the fall of 2020. So that's happening about as soon as it can, and we're super excited about this recommendation, which is now an action item. Also, multicultural affairs. We're also going through on the action item to create a graduate student position within multicultural affairs area to work out identity-based student affinity groups and to help them and provide support to our BIPOC student groups beginning in the 2021-2022 academic year.
And finally, we have 3 action items that bolster already successful programs. One would provide a faculty mentoring component to the Walter and Shirley Massey Scholarship recipients. The other 2 impact the First Generation Fellows program, specifically expanding the duration of the program and ensuring funding for paid internships. All 3 of these action items align with current fundraising priorities of mine. In fact, in the last year, we secured a significant gift for the Freshman Fellows program and began a fund for paid internships. So we'll use these proposals to target fundraising efforts.
All right. Did you all catch all of that? There's going to be a quiz after this. So we've reached the end of the recommendations recap, and that was very fast and very hard to get into the details. So we'll have 3 more sessions during which we'll focus on specific initiatives through these categories. The dates are listed here, and all sessions will be recorded and posted online just like this one. So we'll be circulating those recordings and dates via bi-weekly ARC newsletter, which we'll send beginning next week. A newsletter will precede each online meeting and will keep you abreast of our progress. Also this semester, some subcommittees will be reconvening to advance their action items or to make some new recommendations. And I mentioned that some of them have a lot of clarification they need to do and receive some of the corrections that we've gotten from you all. We're also forming new groups to work on Asian inclusivity and staff concerns related to ARC. So finally, we also want to hear from you, your questions and ideas, but we also want to amplify your anti-racism work. We know that ARC is set up to make recommendations for long-term change, but we know that there is so much current and past anti-racism work that's gone on outside of ARC, in classrooms and in offices, in Zoom book clubs and student group meetings. So we'll be dedicating a section of our ARC newsletters to your work. So we hope you'll reach out to us to let us amplify what you've done and what you've learned and help everybody participate in this more diverse, equitable, inclusive, and anti-racist SAIC. So I'll turn it back to Craig, who will help us with the Q&A.
All right, thank you very much, Delinda. Thank you for the presentation, Jefferson and Alyssa. We're going to try to get to the questions. We received a lot of questions in advance through the community process there. So hopefully we're going to get through as many of those as we can. Since we are going to have future meetings where we can dedicate to sort of more of an in-depth look at some of the action items and how we're going to proceed forward with them. We're going to start with some of the more broad questions about how ARC works and what the process was and its formation. And then we're going to get into some of the pre-submitted questions about the action items. So first question, pre-submitted. You've touched on this a little bit to our panelists, but going with the question that came through the group, through the community. We did receive a question about support for the Asian community in light of the recent anti-Asian violence that happened in Atlanta and the discrimination. So we wanted to make sure that we continue to address that today. Question, what support and resources are available for SAIC's Asian and Asian American community members? Are there plans for additional conversation or acknowledgement on a departmental or team level about these issues?
Thank you for the question. We definitely want and need to do more in this area, which is why we are forming the new subcommittee, which I mentioned before, focused specifically on these issues. We just have started inviting faculty, staff, and students to join, and I think it's we're going to produce hopefully some recommendations that are going to change our environment and do what we can within our community. Additionally, I think it's really important for us to acknowledge Katrina Valera in Multicultural Affairs, who's doing incredible work in this area. She's building programming regarding our AAPI Heritage Month in May, which we've decided to extend. We're working with Katrina May is not a very good academic month for us. So we're going to work on this in April, half of April, and it'll lead into May. So this is really exciting. So what we want to do is we want to give you an opportunity to connect with her. She welcomes individuals to join her by writing to maffai at saic.edu. So that's how you're going to get in touch with Katrina. As we mentioned on our community email, there are services available to all the community members, such as counseling services, safe ride, and escort services. Additionally, for our international students from China and Korea, the Office of Student Affairs has a Korean student advisor and a Chinese student liaison who assists students in adjusting to SAIC and United States culture by building supportive communities, identifying personnel and emotional concerns of students. So providing appropriate and resources to our students is a priority for us. So we hope we'll utilize those services. There are also student-run affinity groups like Namaste, the Chinese Student Association, and the Korean Student Association that build communities of support for their members within the community and programming for the whole entire SAIC community. So if you want to get involved or have a good idea to share, you can reach out to us directly at SAIC-ARC@saic.edu. That's SAIC-ARC@saic.edu.
Thank you, Jefferson.
Sure.
We've received a number of questions about the Anti-Racism Committee's membership. So if you could address, please, can you share more details about how ARC is or is not representative of the different backgrounds and areas of the school?
I can take that one. So we had on the screen the list of the membership that I hope you were able to see. It's published in the many letters and emails that we've sent out. It was important that we selected for the committee a broad representation of the different facets of the school: staff, faculty, students. And so we did select a good number of people, but a lot of people self-selected in the way of just sending us an email and asking us to be a part of the work. So, and we really appreciated that because there were a lot of people who had, like I mentioned, already been doing this work and had the experience and expertise to guide us in what we were doing. Another thing that was, I think, really important that we did was to include various staff members who could implement those ideas that we brainstormed. And so the people who would know how to change the operations that we were asking to operate. And you know, it ended up being such a huge and inclusive group, one that like I've never seen before in my 12 years here. So I think in that way, we really succeeded in having such a broad commitment from a wide part of the campus.
Thank you, Delinda. Another quick programming note, just to remind everybody that we're accepting questions if you submit them in the Q&A feature in Zoom. Right now, we're going through some of the pre-submitted questions that we got from the community, and we're going to go through those as well as we can. Question for our panel. So in the past, the school has had committees that were charged with advancing diversity and inclusion efforts. 1,000 years ago, I was a member of many of those committees. How is this anti-racism committee different from these previous groups?
Thanks, Craig. It is true the school has had other diversity groups and committees in its history, but over the decade that I've been here at SAIC, it is previous DEI committees that actually established the DEI staff roles, including the one Jefferson holds today. Also establishing the College Arts Access Program, where over 80 CPS students have free college prep courses and counseling that results in 100% of graduates getting into college. We fundraise for scholarships programs like the Massey Scholars, for which 60 CPS students have gotten tuition-free education at SAIC. So from 2016 to 2019, We increased full-time faculty hires of color, candidates of color, by 30% to 50-50, and started internal grant programs like the Diversity Infusion Grants promoting diverse curricular content. That we still feel there is more work to be done means that we're not where we want to be. And that's where ARC came in and is active in. In comparison to previous effort, ARC is larger, main group and 6 subcommittees, as we've talked about, and growing. It's more inclusive in its membership, and it directly reports to me. The most striking difference, however, is the historical moment that we are in. More people are paying attention to not just inequities, but to how those inequities are systemically perpetuated in how society is structured and organized. The willingness to see and change that is greater than it has been in the decades, if ever. That's why ARC is poised to make a big impact here at the school.
Thank you, Alyssa. Let's drill in maybe a little bit more because there are questions from the community about it, about the relationship of ARC and the other committees and the ongoing effort at SAIC related to diversity and equity and inclusion. How long will the work of the Anti-Racism Committee continue, and how does it intersect with other ongoing diversity and equity and inclusion efforts?
Yeah, ARC is currently configured to look at some areas where we know we have work to be done, to make recommendations. Hopefully those recommendations turn into action items so that the institution can change the way it does business with these issues. So we want to move through those issues out into a regular structure for ARC of how we should run the school, helping to make those structures run better. That is in a more anti-racist fashion. At some point, ARC as we know it will cease and stop making recommendations, but that doesn't mean that our work is going to be finished. If anything, it says we need to spend time thinking about the structure, and we haven't determined that yet. So moving forward, we have built, and something that I'm really proud of, and I think Delinda did a great job answering, is that we've created an inclusive committee in which people can approach us. I mean, I've had several people who have pestered me and said, I really want to be on, and we haven't denied anyone. So what I'm trying to say is that I don't think you're going to find an inclusive committee like ARC at SAIC. I mean, with 80 people, I mean, that just tells you a little bit about it. And I think we're moving forward, but we don't have all the answers yet. We don't know what the structure is going to look like 2 years from now, but we are putting a lot of thought into it. I'm going to be working on it. The committee is going to be talking about it with consultation with Alyssa and Martin, and we're going to figure out how to move this work into the future. And so ARC presently is that for us, but moving into the years to come, it might be through the DEI office, but the initiatives aren't going to go away. The recommendations, there will be continued recommendations as well as opinions from faculty, staff, and students about how to make SAIC a better environment for everyone. But as you know, it hasn't happened yet, and we're thinking about it, we're working on it.
Thank you so much, Jefferson. I'm sorry, my own follow-up question. We're not talking about ARC replacing the work of those things. We're talking about ARC supplementing and strengthening and empowering efforts that have already been going on and working with other committees.
If I can say that, I forgot to mention Dio's work, which has been so important over the last few years, and also Katrina and Student Affairs, who I've already talked about, are permanent staff positions that are going to go on. So we may change the argument about these different things over time, but we'll be here to guide the ongoing concerns of DEI and of inclusivity as a whole at SAIC. So thanks, Craig.
Thank you very much. Okay, so community questions. Question came in, let's see, about the funding, for the action items. How will these items be funded? Sounds like an Alyssa question. How will these items be funded, and what is the process for implementation of the action items?
Thanks, Craig. The answer to the question is not one size fits all. Some action items require little funding adjustment, like on diverse hiring language. It's more about changing our practice around something we'd been doing anyway. Additionally, we knew with the formation of ARC, we'd have some initiatives we wanted to spend money on. So we've planned for this in our budgeting to make these commitments. So this was planned for next year and beyond. Some budget allocations, like the ombudsperson, will be a pretty large and permanent, which is why we will be searching next year for an appointment the following year, giving us time to prioritize this position into the future. And some items like the expansion of the First Generation Fellows Program will take fundraising efforts. So it's a combination of adding to the operating budget and also fundraising and possibly some reallocation of resources.
Thank you very much. We have a question in the from the inbox regarding the need for permanent BIPOC counselors in the Wellness Center. So what is the Anti-Racism Committee's role in increasing the number of counselors available of BIPOC identification?
I'll take that. So we didn't have a specific ARC group working on this. We did have one for the BIPOC space, but not for the space within the Wellness Center. They do their own programming around this, and they've been pretty proactive about that. I do want to clarify that there are BIPOC counselors working in the Wellness Center now, and they're available for all students, of course. So I know of individuals working there who have created those types of programmings and put together a great list of resources for our students. So please reach out to them directly.
Thank you. We talked about a little bit earlier the common text. So we have a question here about the common text. Someone wrote a suggestion for a potential next common text after CAST. Can you talk a little bit about how the text was chosen and how people can send in their suggestions for the next text?
Yeah, I think this came out of the curriculum committee, but it was from a number of faculty, some working in CP, some working in liberal arts, who are thinking of a good text to assign to the first year program and hopefully expand it out from there. Looking to, as Alyssa mentioned earlier, with our community reading of Claudia's book. So this came out, I think, just from a general conversation among those faculty. So as mentioned, we're figuring out some way to make this a permanent way of suggesting texts going forward, probably another committee that we all love. But that, at the logistics of the book, we'll take some kind of hammering out in terms of who's buying it and how we are assigning it and the time that's carved out for that. But we'll get that going soon.
Thank you, Delinda. Again, for the community here, we see that questions are coming into the Q&A. You can continue to submit your questions. We're working our way through the pre-submitted questions. We've gotten now past the part of the sort of more general questions about ARC, and we're digging into the questions about B23 action items. So we have several questions about the initiatives that were not reflected in the 23 action items. Can you talk a little bit about what's next after these 23 action items? Where do we go from here? Are there going to be other opportunities to address issues that were not included in this initial set of action items?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. One of the things I think it's important to recognize is that there was 40 pages of information that was submitted with these recommendations. So as much as, we've narrowed it down and kind of made it concise so that the community can see what we've done, but there's so much more. We've done a lot, and we'll have that opportunity to address other things that didn't make it to the list of recommendations or the action items. So as mentioned in the presentation, some committees will go back and continue the work that they've they've already started, and we're gonna flesh out things like part-time language or logistics for the BIPOC space. So there's a lot of work that's yet to be done to make these action items good. But we are also meeting with the committee, and we're coming up with a list of new recommendations for the spring. And so we are extremely excited about that, and excited about the new groups, the new group of people that we're bringing in, and also giving opportunities for folks who've worked really hard to take a break from this work. So no, we're not finished. We have 23 action items that we're working with now, and we're pushing forward, but we're generating new ones as soon as next week. So hopefully we'll be creating a couple new subcommittees that will help us move forward with these new ideas.
Very good. Thank you, Jefferson. Okay, so we have a number of questions about the proposed BIPOC space. Jefferson, Delinda, can you explain the BIPOC space a little bit, talk a little bit more about the purpose of the space and why this was proposed as an action item?
Yeah, this came from the student, I think the student letter, but it was also mentioned in the Black faculty letter. It's you know, this is going to be one of those areas where we all have to work together and try to, you know, figure this out. This is not meant to be an exclusionary space, but instead a space where we care for one another, we hold each other, you know, we hold space for each other. And the programming is going to be worked out by a student-focused committee. So this is where we'll include more students onto this particular subcommittee so that they tell us, you know, what they need from that space. I imagine it being a place where we can learn methods of solidarity, nonviolent communication, those types of things. And you know, again, we should do that with mutual care and respect for each other and make this an affirming space.
I'm actually on that committee, and one of the words I heard in discussion about that was healing, and I love that thought about it. Okay.
Really great. Yeah, I also feel like just recentering. I think a lot of people don't understand what it would be like to be in an environment and have to understand or have to negotiate a space where, you know, it may not be welcoming. You know, and it's not like we want to create an environment where anybody is feeling unwelcome, but I think we want everybody to understand what it feels like to be in a space and feel unwelcome or feel like you have to negotiate. Do I belong here? Is this space for me? We're not saying that people are excluded. You know, rather it's negotiating who the space is for and what's to happen in that space and what your role is in helping progress. So I think that this is tough for people. I think it's especially tough for white people to understand that this isn't about centering themselves, and it's about like negotiating what it means. And just like any art project that we would give a student or any art project we give a group of individuals, we're going to jump into this BIPOC space with an attitude that it can succeed, you know, and that we can succeed, and that BIPOC community within SAIC can do well. So I see this as an opportunity for us. Yeah, there's failures involved here. You know, it's like just like any good project, we want it to do really well, but it has to begin with us thinking that this is going to do really well. And we need everyone's participation here, not the BIPOC people, but everybody. So we hope that, you know, this makes people feel better about it, because this is something that our committee has really fought hard for, and we are open for all suggestions and ideas on how to make it work. Thanks.
Thank you, Jefferson. We have questions about the role of the ombudsperson. So for those who don't know what's budding with the OMS, will this person address the disability, the accessibility, and the accommodation needs for faculty, such as something like what the DLRC does? Has this been part of the discussion in ombudsperson?
The ombudsperson, I think, was, you know, that was one of the, again, a suggestion that's been there since the beginning. So they won't replicate the DLRC, for instance, which, you know, has its very specific role for students. but instead it'll be focused on kind of a mediation role, restorative mediating conflict. Those are some, the job description still needs to be drawn up, and that should be a discussion with the committee who hires that person. So it could be including disability and accommodation conflicts, addressing the needs of faculty. And so it has a broad role. That's what we're envisioning at this point. But it will, also, this person will also assess areas of tension in the school, and to help us identify where we need to strategically devote resources and create systems for the school to address some of these longstanding questions and problems.
I guess, slight follow up to that. Well, okay, maybe I'll save it. But the question about, accommodation needs for faculty, that's happening currently in a different place in the school. Do we know?
Right. Yeah. Yes. Employment resources, DLRC. Yeah.
Okay.
Dean of faculty.
Thank you, Delinda. So we've received some questions about reporting racism and resources available to those who have experienced racism on campus or within our community. What mental health or other resources exist? How should students, faculty, and staff report instances of racism?
So students should seek, they can seek support at any time from counseling services. Staff and faculty can contact the Employee Assistance Program directly. So in addition to the individual psychotherapy counseling services offers a diverse set of workshops, support groups, and opportunities. So there's a wide kind of programming that happens there. Faculty can reach out to Jefferson for support in their work, while students can reach out to Debbie Martin, and you should all have her email. Anyone wishing to make a report, though, of a very specific instance of discrimination, harassment, or retaliation should reach out to the Title IX office, and the coordinator there is Luma Atiki. And so go directly to her if it's a very specific directed incident of that.
Thank you. Again, we're getting a little bit closer to our time. We're going to try to run through as many of the pre-submitted questions. And again, we're recording, capturing all of the questions that are being submitted to the Q&A. And if we don't get a chance to get to those today, we will try to get back to those. This is not the last presentation we're going to have this semester. There will be more to come. To our panel, we have some questions about one of the action items discusses the school's teaching and learning center. So we received a question that some people are not familiar with the center. Could you talk more about what this is? Where is it? Does it exist now? What's happening with the teaching and learning center?
A teaching and learning center, which I think everyone knows most colleges have, is a resource for faculty and others working in instruction, like teaching assistants, to learn more about their craft, get support in advancement, find professional development opportunities. As part of the recent strategic planning effort, SASC had prioritized a center for teaching and learning. However, the pandemic has really delayed those plans. So it's still a long-term goal, and we're still enacting some of the programming associated with faculty support through the work of the chair of faculty and the DEI staff. So the center itself is a longer term ambition.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. Got a content note here that regarding the purpose of the diversity, the DLRC, that is for students only, and that if there are issues of accommodations and needs for faculty and staff are handled through the human resources. And again, Delinda, we mentioned for faculty who have issues of accommodation needs, that's through again?
I assume Sean, the dean of faculty.
Dean of faculty.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. But again, the DLRC handles student needs for those types of things. Next question for our panel. The action items include a training program for department heads and hiring managers. When will this training program be rolled out and what will it look like? Is there an opportunity to open this program up to the entire community? And again, this may be our last question. The question is the training program for department heads and hiring managers. When are we going to roll that out and what could that look like?
Well, it's being rolled out right away. One of the things that we've learned in ARC is there's a lot of different kinds of trainings, and there's various different training needs. So there's not one standard training that we can say, okay, this is good for staff, faculty, and students. It's somehow, we're not at that point yet. And we feel that specifying it for like hiring managers and hiring department heads, because even though they're both groups are in charge of bringing people in, they have different methods and processes of doing that. So we have to deal with that and look at these equations differently. So the pilot we're working on is targeted particularly on implicit bias. From it, we hope to learn a lot of things about other training opportunities. If the individuals we're bringing in are sensitive to our needs and sensitive to what our community is saying, and that's really important. The last thing we want is a trainer to come in and to give a generic training that is a one size fits all. Instead, we want to be able to cater to individual groups, and we want our community to be heard. In these trainings, I don't think it's enough for someone just to give us information. We want there to be an exchange, a conversation, a dialogue. So from this, hopefully we're gonna, from our pilot trainings we're doing in the spring, we're gonna have a good idea how we're gonna move forward in the future. So they might be focused on different things, but hopefully they'll cover all the different needs of our community.
Thank you so much, Jefferson. Apologies to everybody who's putting the questions in. We're at our time. We got to wrap up today. I got to go drop off somebody at school. But at any rate, thank you so much to everybody. We're going to collect these questions. We're going to make sure that we get back to these. Again, this isn't not the last chance to have this conversation. This is not the last chance to talk all of us together about these things. Continue to, you can email the SAIC ARC at saic.edu. We're going to try to get back to these questions at the next session that we have in later in the month. We're going to have 3 more sessions, I believe, for the rest of this semester. Thank you to all of our community who has tuned in. Thank you to our panelists, Jefferson, Delinda, and Alyssa. Thank you behind the scenes, Jeff Ward, and everything that you've been doing to help keep us on track, and the rest of the team. Thank you, everybody. Have a great Tuesday. We'll be back again, parts of this this committee, and we're going to get back to your questions and get back to this dialogue that we're having about the work of the Anti-Racism Committee. Thank you very much, and good afternoon.